2021 promises some great new board game releases. We've compiled the most anticipated games coming out every month this year here on Legendary Tactics. I'm here with NATO to look at the most anticipated games coming out in 2021 month by month. Thanks for joining me, NATO.
Hey, no problem, man.
Perfect. Well, let's start with January then. We've got some exciting games coming out this year. So what's in stock for January?
All right, coming in January from Leader Games, we have Oath: Chronicles of Empire and Exile. It's a game by the same designer as Root. 1 to 5 players guide the course of history in an ancient land. It's an adventuring game that is essentially a shared tableau with characters traveling through ancient lands, discovering secrets, and fighting to guide the course of history.
It seems that 2021 will be defined by a lot of these cooperative campaign games. It almost feels like something happened when Gloomhaven came out, and it spawned a whole generation, and sort of an echo generation of these types of games. Now, GMT is a company that you really like. Do they have anything coming out in January?
Yes, Dominant Species Marine. This is still in the P500 shipping at the moment. But players take on the role of one of 4 major aquatic-based animal classes: dinosaur, fish, cephalopod, or crustacean. And your goal is to thrive in as many habitats as possible. And I know the original Dominant Species is such a classic, and I know we've played it. It's been a long time. I don't remember much about it now, but...
It's very different from GMT's other games.
Yes, it's a very unique design, and very influential and very interesting.
Very good. Well, let's move on to February then. There's actually a game by Reiner Knizia coming out. Are you familiar with Reiner Knizia's work?
Yes, I own digital versions of Ra, Yellow and Yangtze, and Tigris and Euphrates. So yes, I know Reiner Knizia.
Good. So he's actually created a new game for 2 players. It's called Royal Visit. It looks like a really compact game where your goal is to draw the king to your castle using the powers of the wizard and the fool. I think it's a tug-of-war style game.
Right.
Also, we've actually featured this game already, the demo of it on our channel, but Sleeping Gods from Red Raven Games, that's due out in February. So the playthrough was a lot of fun. It's a cooperative campaign game. It's also a storybook game. I think the feature element of it is an atlas, and it uses a core map system in the game, and you progress through it by discovering new lands, stories, and challenges as you go.
Yeah, it seemed like a neat game, very much like a, kind of choose your own adventure kind of style, and you drive your boat up and down the river as the story takes you. So it's it strikes me. I like this kind of game. It's neat.
Yeah, I love the narrative side of it, where you almost get a novel with it. As you say, it's a choose your own adventure. So how about March? What do we got in March?
I wonder how many of our listeners actually remember choose your own adventure books. We may be dating ourselves a little bit. Anyway, in March, Frosthaven is the most anticipated game of 2021. And if you backed it on Kickstarter, you'll likely have this game in March. It set records, making $12.9 million to be the 3rd biggest campaign in Kickstarter history. It's a much anticipated sequel to Gloomhaven, and it's a 1 to 4 player cooperative game with a whole new story campaign, a new crafting system, and town management.
That sounds like it'll be there's a ton of people expecting that one. I mean, look at that, $12.9 million.
Yes, I know. And I mean, Gloomhaven was such a beast. It's so much story there, and so much. I don't really know how you can do it bigger, but I know they'll have to.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's going to be interesting to see how it comes across.
Well, actually, if you stick around later in this video, we've got one that is apparently even bigger, and it's actually pushing closer to the $200 mark. So, but we'll get to that one later in the video. So let's move on to April. So Rio Grande Games, they didn't actually put out a major release this year with COVID, but they've got Iberian Railway coming in 2021. And so that's in the Winsome Rail game series. And the setting for Iberian Railways is the Iberian Peninsula in the early days of the railways in Spain and Portugal. And players in the game, you start with no money and income, and you have to connect your cities to the game board, and that creates sort of this railway revenue. So it looks like an interesting game. You're competing for various goals throughout, and it's a railway manager game. So that looks interesting.
Yeah. And then in May, you may have played Ascension or Shards of Infinity. And if you have, you'll likely want to check out Ascension Tactics from Justin Gary. And we've got some gameplay footage on our channel that we did actually last year, and it looks great. We're not entirely sure when it will be released, but this is a hybrid game that blends a fantasy deck building game with tactical miniatures.
That's a little bit of a different hybrid then.
Yes, yeah, and it seems like it has a lot of potential. I think the games that we played were maybe more meant to be introductory, as I recall. But there's definitely kind of an interesting potential out of this one.
Good. I think in May also Machina Arcana is coming out. Can you tell us about that one?
Sure. Machina Arcana is another immersive cooperative explorer game set in a horror steampunk backdrop. And it's set in an ancient subterranean complex inspired by the Cthulhu mythos.
Well, we had to get one Cthulhu game out, that's for sure.
Yeah, of course. What's a year without a new Cthulhu game?
Exactly.
I think that mixing steampunk with the Cthulhu mythos sounds kind of interesting, and there seems to be this move towards combining steampunk and horror for some reason. I know some of the imagery of steampunk might be, just have to add some spooky lighting, and it can be pretty scary, but it seems to be something that's out there.
That's good. Yeah, let's move on to June. So it was actually last March that Jamie Stegmaier from Stonemeyer Games put together a print and play. He calls it a roll and write game. There's a number of these out there, and the working title right now is Rolling Realms. And I spoke to him this month, and he said that they haven't actually got an official release date for this yet, but I would expect it would be in Q1 or 2. And so likely it should be an interesting game. You can play it over Zoom, and I think his goal was that each player gets 9 mini games, and you roll some dice and you allocate those to the different boards. So looks like some fun. But let's move on to July.
All right. Well, one of the biggest and most well-known publishers, Fantasy Flight Games, is set to release their title, Descent: Legends of the Dark, in the third quarter of this year. It's a co-op dungeon crawling game with a companion app like Mansions of Madness, a 16-mission campaign, and upgradable characters. It's a miniatures game with 46 pieces of 3D terrain and 40 minis for heroes and baddies. And it'll be pushing $200 for this game, so I'm guessing the components will be pretty incredible. And Fantasy Flight usually does a pretty darn good job with components.
So we are now into August. Well, this is my absolute favorite month to look out. In 2012, my now favorite board game of all time was released, and that's Kemet from Madagot Games. So I'm really excited because the much anticipated sequel, Kemet Blood and Sand, will be coming out. It's still using miniatures. It's got pyramids, but apparently the game will be more intuitive with some simplified mechanics. I think what they're trying to do is get this out to make it a little bit more accessible, which it concerns me a little bit, I have to say, because I think the original Kemet is almost perfect. But on the other hand, I do like the possibility that it might have wider appeal. So I've kickstarted this one, and I think my copy will be arriving in August if everything stays on schedule. And but I hope this one actually even betters the original.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how, simplified mechanics. I mean, it wasn't that overwrought with rules.
No, not really.
I'm interested to see what they do, because I know, like, for example, when they rebooted Eclipse, they had lots of play testing done by releasing it into the wild, and they were able to adjust without changing the game. They were able to just tweak things so that it's a much better game. It runs like a well-oiled machine now, and I'm hoping that is there. I mean, there were some issues with turn order a little bit that they tried to solve in an expansion, and there's a couple things that might play in that I could kind of see, but I'd be interested to see what they come up with.
Well, the expansions for Kemet, I mean, Tacity was fun. It added an extra technology, an extra color, the black, and I thought that was good. We played Kemet Seth, and it was fine. I don't find myself pulling it out that much, so but I'm excited to see what happens. So let's move on to September. We've got another huge game coming out in September.
Yes, ISS Vanguard from Nemesis Studio is a 1-to-4 player co-op campaign game with asymmetric sections. And it's a space opera where players land on planets, discover secrets, and manage the ship in between missions. It's a story-driven game that will likely appeal to fans of Eclipse and Twilight Imperium. And I know you're a big fan of Twilight Imperium. I'm a big fan of Eclipse, so this will be one that we'll both probably like on some level.
Well, and I just love the co-op games, so to have the campaign element and asymmetric factions or sections sounds fun too. So
yeah,
should be good.
And you know what? It's fun to see the hobby really push the limits of what it's capable of. You know, it's, I mean, obviously that started off with Pandemic Season 1, Pandemic Legacy Season 1. That was such a game changer. But I love how, you know, working in apps and all this stuff, like it's really pushing the envelope on what is possible, and we're not just pushing around counters on hexes anymore.
You got it. So we're into October now. The big game of October is set to be Frostpunk, and this is a little bit different from all of the other campaign-style story-driven games that we've been covering so far. This is a city survival game where heat means life, and every decision you make comes at a cost. So this comes from the designer of Nemesis and This War of Mine, and I think it'll appeal to fans of post-apocalyptic steampunk worlds where players need to manage the infrastructure of their settlement, and I believe it comes also with some moral decisions too. Dead of Winter had that element. That can be a fun way.
Yeah, I think this. I haven't played it, but This War of Mine, I think, took it to a new level in terms of the moral decisions. From what I read of it, I didn't play it, but that was by choice. I think I saw it on a sale at some point, and I just chose not to. It's pretty dark from what I understand, and you've got the decisions that you make are pretty emotional.
Right, you don't play that one with kids.
No, not at all. I to be honest, I don't know Nemesis, but if depending on how it's handled, I think it could be good. I found, you know, something like Dead of Winter is the right kind of level of moral, you know, choice that I want to bring to my gaming life. But I'm interested to see what happens with that one.
So tell us that we got a bit of a throwback game in November.
Okay, well, you may remember playing November's new release that was originally a hit in 1989. Hero Quest is a D&D style dungeon crawler being reskinned and re-released with new miniatures, 76 to be specific, with different model colors, an updated rulebook, and new quest books.
I remember playing that one as a kid, and back then it was revolutionary. It's sort of like a dumbed down Gloomhaven, right?
Yeah. It's interesting that in this era of Gloomhaven that they would try a re-release, actually.
Yeah, it might be fun as a Gloomhaven light for kids, and with some spit and polish on it, it may actually turn out to be a better game. I think the rulebook is going to be mostly the same with a few updates. Let's get into December. So a game that's been 3 years in development, Aeon Trespass Odyssey. It's a huge game. It's fully cooperative. It's a campaign game of adventurers, exploration, and base building. It's also a tactical game. I think there's about 200 hours of content. There's 1,500 cards, and it also boasts a novel's worth of narrative and 6-inch miniatures. So it seems like they're really going over the top with this one.
Yeah, now if I remember correctly, I think Gloomhaven had somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 hours of content.
Right.
So this is twice the size. I mean, that's a big game. That's a big commitment.
For sure.
Again, I mean, I love the fact that they're pushing the envelope as to what's possible. I don't know if I want to review that one, because how many hours of content do you have to plow through before you feel you're qualified to give a review on it. But I'm sure there will be people that dig right in and they love it. I do wonder if a game that big does limit its appeal, because 200 hours, even if it's spread out over, well, even a year, it's pretty much a year or plus of gaming every week for a few hours. So.
Really is, but there are people out there who that game will be specifically for. So.
Yeah. So, and I'm always, as I said, I'm always interested in games that push the hobby further down the road. So
are there any other games on your radar then for 2021?
Well, the two that I'm really kind of interested in both come from GMT, and the first is Twilight Struggle: The Horn of Africa. Which is a lunchtime version, Twilight Struggle. It's designed to be played fairly quickly. maybe a couple games in a lunch hour, that kind of thing.
I think the cards in that one can also be used in Twilight Struggle and vice versa. So there's some cross-pollination there.
Yeah, I've seen it. It looks like it's just a section of the Twilight Struggle map board. But again, I don't know a ton about it. But I mean, I'm always interested in Twilight Struggle content. So so that's going to be interesting. The other one is hopefully coming out this year. I know people have been waiting for this one for a long time. It's called Mr. President. And I'm really interested in it because, there's a lot of election games. There's a lot of games out there where you're running for president or whatever. But this actually picks up right where those other games leave off. So you've just been elected president. Now what? How do you manage the domestic policy, the foreign policy? How do you maintain your allies and deal with that guy in Congress who doesn't like you? I hope it turns out as well as I think it might.
So those are some of the big games that are being released in 2021, and some of those dates may change through the year. Please forgive us if that happens. I mean, we're really early in January, but please let us know what games you're most looking forward to in the comments below. And if this snapshot of upcoming games piqued your interest, then please let us know by giving us a like. And also, if you'd like to stay up to date on some of these games throughout the year, I'm sure we'll be covering lots of them, then subscribe to our channel and come back when you can stay a little longer.